Mukata had once been nothing more than a sad excuse of a salaryman, who was dumped by the woman he loved and crushed under the weight of his own boring existence. His life was basically a trash fire. But apparently, God must have looked at this loser's pitiful state and thought, fine, let's throw this guy into another world and see what happens. And so our boy Mukata got isekai'd. Now normally, this is the part where the main character gets some broken world-ending cheat skill. But nope. While the priest praised other shiny new heroes who were getting cool things like the holy sword technique and the ability to cast every magic under the sun, our boy Mukata got an worthless online grocery shop skill.
I got played.
Basically Amazon Prime, but even sadder. The man didn't even get superpowers, just the ability to order snacks. When he realized this was his one and only unique skill, Mukata's soul nearly left his body. He watched the others flex their legendary abilities while he stood there thinking he should have just stayed unemployed in Japan. Even so, he still had to appear before the king with the other so-called heroes. The king explained that his kingdom was under attack from the demon lord and begged for their help. The three OP heroes jumped at the chance, eager to show off their new cheat codes. Mukata, on the other hand, looked at himself, looked at them, and decided, nah. He would be about as useful as a plastic sword in a dragon fight. He politely declined and asked for a simple, peaceful life instead. Surprisingly, the king let him go, even tossing him 20 gold coins like hush money. Once in town, Mukata's weird modern clothes made him stand out, so he quickly bought something less suspicious. After wandering around, he got a room at an inn and breathed a sigh of relief. He already had trust issues with the king, noticing how suspiciously luxurious the palace looked. In his head, the kingdom was shady AF, so his new life plan was simple: get out as fast as possible. Checking his stats, Mukata discovered two more skills: item storage and appraisal. At first, his grocery app didn't respond, making him wonder if it was broken. But when he tapped the screen, a full-on online shop appeared. He tried ordering water and snacks, and after paying with his coins, a package popped out of thin air like Amazon on steroids. Suddenly, his useless skill didn't seem so bad. Doing the math, Mukata realized 1 gold coin equaled about $100, meaning the king had basically handed him a 6-month living allowance. The next day, he hopped on a carriage to escape the kingdom and bumped into a merchant. Through small talk, he learned his storage skill was insanely rare, like 1 in 1,000 rare. But when the merchant heard about his appraisal skill, he dropped the real bombshell. Only summoned heroes could have it. Mukata instantly panicked, hiding his secret like a man hiding browser history from his mom. When asked where he was headed, Mukata admitted he wanted to reach the next kingdom. The merchant told him that was smart because his kingdom was circling the drain and might shut its borders any day now. Just as Mukata processed that horrifying news, their carriage got suspended. At a local tavern, he learned why. The king had stopped carriages to keep people trapped. The logic was simple and dirty. If citizens ran, the army would shrink. Everyone whispered about escaping, and Mukata joined in on the worrying, especially since monsters lurked outside the borders. He finally dragged himself to the Adventurers Guild and requested an escort. The clerk quoted 8 gold coins for the journey, which almost made him choke. But since he had no choice, he paid up. A C-rank adventurer named Werner accepted the job and introduced his squad: Vincent the swordsman, Rita the scout, Ramon the mage, and Fanka the healer. On their trip, Mukata offered to handle food. He casually pulled a stove from his storage, and the party almost fainted. Vincent gawked at the storage skill, Rita admired his stove, and Mukata flashed back to how he avoided paying 50 gold for a magic stove by just ordering a cheap one online. He cooked up instant soup and sandwiches, and the party reacted like they were dining in a 5-star restaurant. Ramon couldn't believe soup could taste that good, while the bread had them questioning their entire lives. Their little food party ended quickly when monsters attacked. Werner and Vincent sliced them apart like pros, while Mukata sat there frozen, realizing this was no game. It was real blood, real monsters, and he was way out of his league. After patching themselves up, Rita reported that a red boar was up ahead. Everyone started discussing how to deal with it, but the oversized bacon on legs decided not to wait. It charged straight at them. Mukata nearly fainted at the sight, wondering why the boar looked more like a tank with tusks. Werner barked at him to get out of the way while the party jumped into action. With clean teamwork, they dropped the beast, leaving Mukata stunned by how strong they were. As usual, the adventurers stripped the corpse for skin and horns, but the meat was far too much to carry. That's when Mukata casually flexed his storage skill, offering to stash the extra meat. With that solved, they stopped for dinner. The group eagerly gathered around Mukata like kids around an ice cream truck, but he panicked inside, embarrassed to cook in front of them. Not because he was shy, but because he didn't want anyone sniffing out his shady grocery cheat. Still, he whipped up a stew with bacon, cabbage, potatoes, and sausages. beverages. As they dug in, Mukata nervously watched, wondering if it tasted off. Instead, they practically inhaled the food, begging for seconds. He was shocked until Ramon explained that adventurers usually survive on jerky and bread that could break teeth. Rita even claimed she felt stronger just from eating it. Suspicious, Mukata secretly used his appraisal skill and nearly choked. The food actually gave stat buffs. Suddenly, his cooking wasn't just tasty, it was literally performance-enhancing drugs. Mukata realized if anyone found out, he'd be kidnapped and milked like a walking fast food farm, so he swore to keep it hidden. But little did he know, a certain beast was already spying on them from the bushes. Days later, they camped in the forest, and Mukata tried grilling some of that boar meat. He seasoned it with a special sauce from his online shop, and the smell alone had his party drooling. Unfortunately, it also attracted something way scarier than a hungry adventurer. As Mukata proudly served the meal, a massive Fenrir appeared right behind him. The entire party froze, pale as ghosts. The legendary wolf spoke. Yes, it talked, and demanded a serving. Mukata's survival instincts kicked in, and he quickly offered a plate. The beast swallowed it in one bite and immediately demanded more. Mukata cooked, the wolf ate, and the cycle repeated like a deadly all-you-can-eat buffet.
Stop it. Get some help.
Finally, the Fenrir was satisfied, but instead of leaving, it announced it would make Mukata its master. Mukata tried to refuse, but one death glare from the wolf made him agree instantly. His party hyped him up while he just wanted to cry. The contract was sealed, glowing magic and all, and Mukata suddenly found himself stuck with a gluttonous mythical beast that demanded 3 meals a day. When told to name it, Mukata threw out lame dog names that the wolf rejected. Eventually, he suggested Fell, and the Fenrir accepted. From that moment, wherever they went, people scattered like cockroaches. Werner explained that Fenrir were infamous for leveling entire nations, and Franca confirmed it wasn't a myth. Mukata's anxiety skyrocketed, while Fell casually promised to nuke anyone who bothered them, which only made the others sweat harder. Later, during lunch, Mukata realized the food supply was already empty thanks to Fell's bottomless stomach. When Fell demanded more meat, Mukata snapped, telling him to hunt his own damn dinner. To everyone's shock, Fell simply agreed and disappeared into the woods. Just like that, Mukata had accidentally become the boss of a monster feared by entire kingdoms, all because he could cook better than Gordon Ramsay.
Emotional, damn it!
Not long after being told to hunt his own food, Fell returned casually carrying a giant bird the size of a truck. Werner nearly dropped dead on the spot when he realized it was a rock bird, a B-rank monster that usually required a small army to kill, but to Fell, it was basically a chicken nugget with wings. The wolf tossed the corpse down like delivery takeout, telling the group they could keep the claws and beak as long as he got all the meat. Mukata reluctantly got to work, treating the monster like it was just chicken thighs. He marinated it with teriyaki sauce from his cheat shop and started grilling. Fell, being the greedy beast he was, waited impatiently for his massive portion while Mukata fed the adventurers first. For once, the wolf actually showed restraint, sitting still like an oversized mutt waiting for his treat.
Damn!
When he finally got his share, Fell devoured it so fast the others wondered if he even chewed. The party eventually reached the border of the kingdom of Vinan, where soldiers had their weapons drawn and siege weapons ready. Werner explained they were preparing in case Fell went on a rampage. He went ahead to talk, leaving Mukata sweating bullets. The commander clearly didn't like the idea of letting in a creature infamous for erasing countries. Mukata begged Fell not to start trouble, and the wolf casually reassured everyone that he'd only kill people if they attacked first, like that made it better. The soldiers nearly fainted when they realized the wolf could talk. Somehow, the commander gave the okay, but the whole army kept glaring like they were watching a ticking time bomb walk through the gate. When the adventurers showed their guild cards, Mukata realized he didn't have one and got slapped with another fee. At this point, his wallet was bleeding more than his dignity. Inside the city, Werner warned him that people would definitely come after him now that he was branded a legendary beast tamer. Mukata groaned, thinking he had escaped politics, only to end up neck-deep in it again. Still, he told himself he'd just keep traveling, selling goods, and using his weird grocery app to survive. Werner suggested he join a guild. Mukata thought the merchant guild would suit him better, but Vincent pointed out the adventurers guild would be handy for selling Fell's monster parts. Franca then dropped the genius idea of joining both, which made Mukata realize he was stressing for nothing. But before he could decide, a servant immediately tried to drag him to meet the local count. Mukata wanted no part of it, but the man refused to take no for an answer until Fell stepped forward. One glare from the wolf, and the servant ran away screaming like a toddler. Werner worried about political backlash, but Fell just said he'd destroy anyone dumb enough to try something. Vincent joked that only a dragon could stand up to Fell, and Mukata nearly passed out learning dragons were real. Fell nonchalantly mentioned he fought one 400 years ago, which only added to Mukata's stress-induced ulcers. After signing off on Werner's job, the group split up and Mukata headed to the Merchant Guild. The streets parted like he was Moses. Nobody dared get near with Fel towering beside him. Inside, every merchant stared in fear, but Mukata calmly asked to join. The clerk explained the ranking system, gave him an iron rank, and handed over his guild card. That night, Mukata discovered inns didn't allow beasts inside, but Fel was too busy demanding dinner to care. Mukata grilled meat, craving rice, so he ordered a stove and rice cooker from his shop. Fel sat drooling while he experimented with different sauces. To the wolf, garlic flavor was god tier. Mukata treated himself to a beef bowl so good even he was amazed by his own cooking. The next morning, Mukata returned to the merchant guild to sell his goods. The clerk checked his items, nearly screamed, and sprinted off. Confused, Mukata was ushered into the guildmaster's office. The man examined his salt and pepper like they were holy relics, claiming the quality was worthy of kings. Mukata, of course, had just grabbed them off the virtual grocery shelf for pocket change, but he lied smoothly, saying he found them during his travels. Respecting his mystery, the guildmaster offered to buy the lot for 14 gold coins. Mukata's jaw hit the floor. Those items had cost him basically pennies. In that moment, he realized he had stumbled into the most profitable scam of his life. The guildmaster tried to play hard to get, but the man's poker face was weaker than wet tissue. After pretending to hesitate, he cranked up the offer all the way to 17 gold coins. Mukata, seeing how easy this hustle was, snatched the deal without blinking. The guy had basically robbed the guild by just existing.
You're a victim!
For now, money wasn't going to be his problem. With heavy pockets and light confidence, he strutted over to the Adventurers Guild. The mood inside was different, less business meeting, more DMV nightmare. When he told the clerk he wanted to join, she didn't even bother looking at him. She slapped a form his way like she was swatting a fly. He filled it out, and she casually yeeted his card across the counter, announcing he was G rank, which is basically the kiddie pool of adventurers. Mukata asked for an explanation, and she sighed so hard it could have powered a windmill. She explained that ranks went from G to S. He could only take missions one tier higher than his own, and if he died out there, well, tough luck, no refunds.
What?
Mukata went to check the job board and, like the broke beginner he was, grabbed the easiest herb gathering quest. The next morning, he geared up, ready to touch grass for money, but Fel stared him down like an angry parent at the dinner table. Breakfast first, the big wolf demanded. Mukata fed him and they set out, but halfway there, Fel started whining about still being hungry. Mukata, now more chef than adventurer, told him to go hunt again. Fel agreed, but not before acting like Mukata would die instantly without him, placing a protective barrier around him like a babysitter locking the kid's playpen. He then dashed off, demanding lunch be ready when he returned. Mukata began his quest, and thanks to his appraisal skill, finding herbs was child's play. He even wondered if bringing in extras would fatten the reward. Mission complete, he decided it was lunchtime. Out of meat, he settled for cheap spaghetti from his mystical online shop. Just as he was finishing, Fel returned dragging a rock bird, bragging about wanting more teriyaki. The wolf casually admitted he killed a whole buffet of monsters but couldn't carry them all at once. Mukata told him they'd pick up the leftovers later. Fel sniffed at the strange spaghetti. Mukata explained it was from his world, and soon enough, the picky wolf was slurping noodles like a toddler at Olive Garden. Once Mukata busted out Parmesan cheese, Fel leveled up his taste buds and got sauce all over himself, looking like a giant furry toddler. Mukata couldn't stop laughing until Fel showed him the mountain of monsters he'd slaughtered. Among them was an orc, which disgusted Mukata, but Fel casually said they were delicacies, basically walking pigs. Dragging his endless meat haul, Mukata went back to the guild. The same dead-eyed clerk was shocked to see him return with so many herbs, muttering about how lucky he was before tossing him 9 silver. Mukata then mentioned selling monsters, pointing at Fel. The girl nearly had a heart attack, but once she recovered, she sent him to the guild butcher. The butcher had already heard rumors about Mukata and almost fainted when the guy started pulling monsters out like a shady magician. Even A-ranked beasts were in the pile. Mukata told him to strip the materials but leave the meat, and the butcher said the job would take till tomorrow. Still, he prepped one orc so Mukata and Fel could have dinner. That night, Mukata fried orc meat with flour, finishing it with leftover sauce. Fel tore into it like he hadn't eaten in weeks, praising the tender taste compared to regular boar. Mukata, at first grossed out by eating what looked like a human-shaped pig, took a bite, and to his shock, it was delicious. Lesson learned: sometimes, ugly food is still good food. The next morning, Mukata dragged himself back to the butcher's shop, only to find a literal mountain of meat waiting for him. The butcher tossed him a pouch so fat with gold it nearly broke his wrist. 202 coins in total. Mukata almost fainted because this clueless man thought adventuring was supposed to be a grind. Yet he was out here printing money like a fantasy ATM. The butcher, seeing his dumbfounded face, decided to school him about the real value of monster parts, like orc testicles for male vitality and boar tusks for crafting. Mukata almost gagged, but hey, gold is gold. On top of that, the butcher handed him demonic stones from the A-rank monsters Fel casually tossed into the pile. Word had already spread around town. People whispered about whether Fel was truly a legendary Fenrir or just a big-ass dog with good PR. Mukata, hearing the chatter, thought it was time to dip. Staying in one place too long screamed death flags, and he wasn't about to play that game. Fel didn't care, but when he saw the meat stash, his stomach growled louder than thunder. Out in the wild, Mukata decided to reward his overpowered wolf for making him stupid rich. He pulled up his magical online shop, flashing cuts of meat from his own world. Fel started drooling so hard Mukata thought it was raining. Soon, Mukata whipped up a mixed platter, and Fel dove in like he hadn't eaten in weeks. Then came the main event, Japanese Black Wagyu. Fel was offended by the small serving size, but once the taste hit his tongue, his brain practically short-circuited. Mukata explained it came from cows raised like royalty, and Fel, now juiced up with Wagyu steroids, declared he could beat a dragon. Mukata, terrified, appraised Fel and saw his stats had skyrocketed. The wolf wasn't bluffing. He was on cheat mode. Full of energy, Fel bolted off for a midnight hunting spree, but not before slapping a barrier around Mukata, claiming it could even block dragon breath. Mukata, too tired to argue, tucked himself in like a baby while Fel went Godzilla mode in the forest. That night turned into a massacre. Rockbirds got shredded in one swipe, a giant deer got fried with lightning, and when a chimera showed up, Fel blasted it into atoms with one move, lighting up the forest like a fireworks show. The next morning, Mukata woke up surrounded by 3 mountains of monster corpses. Fel shrugged, admitting maybe he overdid it, but bragged about one-shotting a chimera that normally gave him trouble. Mukata, staring at the carnage, decided Wagyu beef was officially banned from Fel's diet. During lunch, Mukata asked if Fel always fought with magic. The wolf explained he was blessed by the wind goddess herself and was basically a storm with fur. Mukata, realizing magic was a thing, wondered if he could use it too. Fel told him to check his stats, and sure enough, Mukata had mana. He begged for guidance, but Fel's version of teaching was, well, just think about it. Mukata closed his eyes, imagined fireballs, and of course, nothing happened. Embarrassed, he looked like an idiot miming superpowers. Fel finally showed him how to feel mana flow, and after a few tries, Mukata managed to cough out the weakest fireball in history. Fel, unimpressed, told him the only real way to learn was through fighting. Mukata immediately panicked, but Fel had no patience for cowards. Dragging him off, Fel led him straight into a goblin village. Mukata nearly cried, saying there were too many, so Fel did the worst possible thing. He howled and summoned every goblin within earshot. Mukata got chased like a marathon runner with bad knees, forced to fling fireballs while tripping over his own feet. One goblin lunged at him, but Fel's barrier saved him, giving him time to keep throwing spells. Eventually, one fireball actually packed some heat, knocking goblins back before Mukata collapsed like a dead battery. When he woke up, he was shaking from trauma, but Fel told him to stop whining and thank him for unlocking magic. Not only that, but Mukata had actually leveled up and even gained the fire magic skill. As a twisted reward, Fel proudly dragged back the Goblin King. The boss wasn't edible, but it did come with a shiny magic stone, so at least Mukata's suffering wasn't completely useless. Fel, the oversized stomach disguised as a wolf, decided that since magic stones were basically money printers, he deserved another Wagyu steak feast. Mukata, meanwhile, looked like a phone battery on 1%. Mana gone, soul broken. He shut Fel down instantly. Too tired to cook, Mukata just bought a random mix of sweetbreads, hoping sugar could bribe the beast. Fel threw a tantrum about the lack of meat, but after one bite, his divine taste buds betrayed him. The mighty Fenrir was now happily scarfing down pastries like a middle-aged aunt discovering donuts at a buffet. Mukata warned about cavities and diabetes, but Fel flexed his wind goddess blessing like a spoiled kid with plot armor. Disease? Never heard of her. Mukata cried foul, begging for blessings of his own, while somewhere in the heavens, the wind goddess was watching like a snack-deprived stalker, furious that she couldn't taste earth sweets. Divine life was tragic. Arriving at the next town, chaos brewed. Guards nearly fainted at the sight of Fel and demanded responsibility if he caused trouble. Mukata, sweating harder than a liar at tax season, quickly flashed his guild card and downgraded Fel to Great Wolf. Fel tried to correct them, but Mukata shut him down. Less attention meant fewer pitchforks. Inside, Mukata sought directions and stumbled into a tavern full of rowdy adventurers. To loosen their tongues, he bought drinks, and suddenly, everyone was his best friend. They explained the kingdoms and, spotting his cluelessness, offered him a rare adventurer's map. They swore it was priceless, so Mukata coughed up 1 gold without hesitation. The moment they left, the rest of the tavern burst into laughter. Our boy had just been scammed. The map was worth 1 silver at the guild. Fel comforted him, but only because a broke Mukata meant less meat money. Priorities, as always. Meanwhile, the wind goddess was losing her divine mind. Watching Fel and Mukata gorge on sweets and meat while she, an all-powerful goddess, couldn't even lick frosting? That was cosmic torture. Later, Fel blasted through the forest so fast Mukata thought that they'd hit the ocean. Nope, Fel stopped at a lake, craving sushi-grade fish. Rods were too mainstream, so he nuked the lake with lightning, frying an entire ecosystem in seconds. Mukata collected the floaters, spotting some trout and 1 suspicious pink fish. Fel swore it made his tongue tingle, but Mukata's brain cells actually worked for once. He appraised it. It was poisonous. Fel sulked. Mukata refused, and dinner survived. Instead, he cleaned the safe fish, thankful for those YouTube cooking tutorials back home, and grilled them to perfection. Fel devoured the feast while Mukata cracked open a beer, living his best camping life. Peace shattered when a random blue slime bounced into their lives. Mukata panicked, but Fel assured him it was weak. 1 poke later, Mukata realized it was basically living jelly. The slime high-fived him, ate bottles, and even tried to swallow the frying pan. Mukata stopped it, but secretly loved the idea of a mobile trash can. After some pats, the slime bonded with him and magically became his familiar. No ritual, no contract, just vibes. Mukata named it Suie, proving once again that he had 0 creativity. Days passed, and Mukata attempted earth magic. His big accomplishment? Flicking pebbles. Fel roasted him, suggesting real combat, but Mukata's goblin trauma said no thanks. Meanwhile, Suie had already hit level 8 from eating random junk. Even the slime was outpacing him.
Damn!
Fel and Suie eventually ganged up, demanding food like union workers on strike. Mukata cooked an orc meat bowl, even making a kitty version for Suie. They all ate happily, until Fel demanded seconds and Suie bounced impatiently for more. Mukata, once again, realized he wasn't the hero of the story. He was the underpaid chef babysitting a wolf with no brain cells and a slime with a bottomless stomach.
Stop it. Get some help.
After dinner, Suie decided to flex his hidden skill, dishwashing slime edition. He dissolved every leftover scrap like a living dishwasher, while Mukata looked at him with tears of gratitude. Finally, someone in this squad who wasn't a freeloading glutton. Feeling generous, Mukata pulled out dessert, dorayaki, a sweet pastry stuffed with red bean paste. Suie devoured it with the joy of a toddler discovering sugar for the first time, and Mukata felt like a proud dad. At least his slime appreciated him. Morning came, and Fel woke up with a smug grin, claiming he had received a divine WhatsApp message from the wind goddess herself. When Mukata dragged himself up, Fel relayed the gossip. Apparently, the goddess Nenri was willing to bless him, but only under her conditions: weekly prayer and weekly tribute of earth sweets. Mukata couldn't believe this goddess was basically running a snack subscription service. Fel added that it wouldn't be a full blessing, just a minor one, but even that was OP: immunity to status ailments and magic power-ups. Mukata accepted instantly. Who cared about dignity when donuts could buy divine protection? Of course, Nenri's first demand wasn't vague. She specifically wanted dorayaki, cream bread, and melon bread. Mukata cursed under his breath, but prepared the offerings anyway. The moment they vanished, he knew the deal was sealed. In the divine realm, Nenri bit into the dorayaki and nearly wept. She devoured it so fast that regret hit immediately. Coffee arrived with the package, and when she sipped it, the bitterness with sweetness nearly destroyed her. She swore she'd savor the rest. But who was she kidding? Seconds later, she inhaled everything like a sugar addict at 3 a.m. Back in the mortal world, Mukata's training finally showed results. Thanks to the blessing, his pebbles evolved into actual stone bullets, fired with force instead of looking like a toddler throwing gravel. Suie was now level 13, growing faster than Mukata's confidence, and he wondered if his slime might even evolve someday. Exhausted from draining his mana bar, he popped some chocolate, even sharing a piece with Suie. Fel eventually returned, pretending to be tired from running. Mukata didn't buy it, but the wolf pulled the classic victim card, whining about carrying Mukata every day. Mukata sighed and bought more chocolate anyway, because apparently his life purpose was running a divine catering service. That's when Nenri slid into his DMs again. She framed it as a divine message, but really, it was just her begging for chocolate. Mukata groaned. It hadn't even been a week since her last sugar haul. Still, she nagged until he gave in. Somewhere in heaven, a goddess was slowly turning into a snack goblin. Before Mukata could enjoy peace, Fel suddenly declared they were leaving. His suspicious face said it all. After sprinting through the forest, they stopped at the mouth of a dungeon. Mukata's soul nearly left his body. Why the hell were they here? Fel calmly explained it was for training, just like when Mukata learned fire magic fighting goblins. Mukata tried to backpedal out of existence, but Fel dragged him forward. But staring at the dungeon entrance, Mukata wanted to cry. Fel swore he'd already scouted it and that only weak monsters were inside, but Mukata trusted that about as much as a used car salesman. Fel told him not to worry, since he had a barrier for protection, but then immediately followed up with the cold truth. One day, he might not be there, so Mukata had to learn to fight on his own. Mukata, knowing he couldn't win against Fel's stubbornness, reluctantly agreed. But he demanded time to prepare first, because walking into a dungeon unready was basically suicide. Mukata, being the human vending machine that he was, decided to prepare a full-on buffet from his magic shop. Dishes piled high, sauces dripping, desserts lined up. This man was about to eat like he was at an all-you-can-eat Vegas buffet. Fel raised a brow, curious what the hell his contractor was doing stuffing his face before a dungeon run. Mukata proudly explained that food from his world gave temporary buffs. Fel's ears perked up instantly, remembering how that Wagyu steak had turned him into an even bigger steroid wolf. The problem? Mukata had no clue which dish boosted what stat. His genius plan was to eat literally everything and leave the scraps for Fel and Suie. So he stuffed himself like it was his last supper. Bite of curry here, spoon of stew there, some random bread, and dessert on top. Fel sat back watching him eat with the patience of a babysitter, while Suie, being the bottomless slime he was, licked his plate clean in a single gulp. Fel even asked if the garbage Suie ate counted as a buff too, but Mukata clarified that trash just helped the slime level up. Basically, Suie was a recycling bin with EXP gain. By the time Mukata finished his dessert, he looked ready to explode, but when he checked his stats, he almost cried with joy. All his attributes had shot up by around 20%. Fel and Suie's stats boosted too, and Fel instantly declared it was go time. Mukata, still clutching his food baby stomach, begged him to wait, but Fel shoved him toward the dungeon anyway. As they crept forward, Fel got tired of Mukata's snail pace and just pushed him straight into danger. The first enemy was a slime. Mukata hesitated, feeling guilty about killing something that looked like jelly, but Suie had no such feelings. He spat acid and melted it in seconds. Fel praised Suie like a proud uncle, even wondering if this slime was something unique. Mukata, meanwhile, was wondering why his pet was already cooler than him. More slimes oozed out, and Mukata managed to use Stone Bullet to finish one off, while Suie casually handled the other. Just when he thought he was safe, Fel dropped the warning. Horned rabbits ahead. Sure enough, a bunch of killer bunnies came charging. Mukata panicked, flailing his sword around like he was cutting weeds. Somehow, it worked. As they went deeper, Mukata asked why monsters weren't avoiding Fel like usual, since normally his presence cleared out whole areas. Fel told him that dungeon rules were different. Inside here, monsters attacked no matter what, and Mukata finally realized he was in hell. On the next level, they faced kobolds. Mukata fired off his Stone Bullet spell and miraculously downed 2 in a row. For once, he actually felt proud of himself, standing tall like some budget hero. Fel instantly humbled him, saying he still had much to learn. Mukata, instead of sulking, got fired up, swearing to get stronger. Growth arc unlocked. But then they reached the final floor and reality smacked him in the face. Fel claimed there would be around 10 kobolds waiting. Instead, there were way more, like a furry army convention. Mukata's soul left his body. He immediately tried to quit, but Fel grabbed him by the back like a misbehaving puppy. Fel told him he and Suie together could handle it. Mukata laughed nervously, not believing a word, but Suie was bouncing like he'd just chugged an energy drink. Before Mukata could protest, Fel literally kicked him forward as bait. Every kobold in the room turned their eyes on him. He screamed as they charged, but Fel's barrier held them back long enough for Suie to launch acid attacks while Mukata hurled stone bullets with shaking hands. The duo actually managed to wipe out most of the horde, but then the ground shook. The survivors were blown away, and out stepped the Kobold King. Twice the size, dripping with menace and radiating pure nightmare fuel. Mukata nearly soiled himself on the spot. The king's attack barely missed him, forcing him to run for his life while frantically shooting stone bullets. They bounced off the monster like pebbles against a tank. Even firing both hands rapid fire barely scratched it. Fel calmly told him the barrier might not hold forever, so he'd better not get hit. Basically, dodge or die. But as the Cobalt King readied its monstrous attack, Mukata, trembling but determined, managed to launch a stone blast straight at the beast's head. The spell hit with a satisfying crunch, leaving a dent in the king's shiny blue noggin. However, the beast, apparently allergic to death, got back up, shaking off the blow like it had a bad hangover. Mukata attempted another attack, but predictably ran out of mana mid-swing, looking like a kid waving a stick at a raging bull. The Cobalt King charged with jaws snapping, but Mukata's barrier popped up just in time, sending him into temporary relief. Fel, ever the annoying smartass, revealed that he had lied about the barrier's limits, claiming that such a weak attack would never have broken it anyway. Mukata could only groan at being played like a fool. While Mukata's ego and sanity melted, Suie finally stepped up, unleashing his acid attack. The Cobalt King dissolved into a gooey mess faster than a sugar cube in tea. Suie began to glow mysteriously as Mukata, overwhelmed by exhaustion and hunger, passed out flat on the dungeon floor. Fel, sighing with exaggerated patience, carried him out, while Suie fretted over his new master, bubbling with excitement. In an unexpected twist, Suie suddenly started talking. He called Fel Uncle Fel, citing his strength and care as reasons for the honorary title. Fel predictably snapped at the nickname, but his pride was tinged with a tiny glimmer of affection. He left briefly to grab a snack but returned to make sure Suie stayed protected within his barrier. When Mukata awoke, he panicked momentarily, only to realize he was safe outside. Suie comforted him, chatting incessantly about the battle, which shocked Mukata even more. He was both adorable and terrifying now. Suie explained that he had gained the ability to speak after they defeated the Cobalt King, and he now addressed Mukata as master. Mukata, of course, found him unbearably cute and checked his stats. Suie had leveled up and even gained a new acid bullet skill. Mukata also checked himself and discovered he had leveled up 4 times and unlocked the Earth Magic skill. Finally feeling like a competent adventurer rather than a stressed-out cook, Fel returned, and Mukata asked where he had gone. Fel claimed he had gone off to find some food because he had been hungry, but made it clear he preferred Mukata's cooking and therefore expected a reward for helping him teach earth magic. Mukata groaned at Fel's manipulative genius but relented. He whipped up a quick meal, combining eggs with leftover rockbird into a surprisingly delicious dish. Fel devoured it instantly, marveling at Mukata's creative use of eggs, while Suie echoed the praise, happily gobbling it down as well. After eating, Mukata asked if Fel had been chatting with Suie, and the slime confirmed that he had indeed had a long conversation with Uncle Fel while Mukata was asleep. Mukata couldn't stop laughing at Fel's predicament, but Fel's face twisted into a scowl as he reminded Suie not to call him uncle. Mukata, of course, kept roasting him, pointing out that compared to Suie, only 2 weeks old, Fel was basically grandpa material. Suie stubbornly insisted, and Fel's frustrated yelling led to tears from the tiny slime. Mukata mockingly called Fel mean, and finally, Fel begrudgingly allowed the title Uncle Fel to stick. As the trio continued their journey, Fel casually mentioned that their route would take them straight through Warthros and Griffin territory. Humans usually went out of their way to avoid such areas, but Fel shrugged off the danger entirely. Mukata nearly fainted at the thought of facing monsters head-on, pleading with Fel to turn around. Fel calmly told him that they were already in Orthros territory, so it was too late to back out, and that these creatures were no real threat to him anyway. Mukata, of course, panicked silently, imagining every possible attack scenario while Fel strolled ahead like he owned the place. Mukata could hear the ominous sounds of the forest, his nerves twitching like a cat on espresso. Soon enough, a pack of Orthros emerged from the shadows, twin-headed wolves with enough teeth to intimidate most people. Fel, unfazed as usual, used his signature intimidation to make the pack back off. Mukata, however, noticed one particularly foolish young Orthros that didn't get the memo. Fel calmly told him to stand back with Suie while he handled the reckless pup. Mukata dove into a bush, peeking out like a nervous squirrel, while Fel tried to warn the beast off. Predictably, it lunged, and Fel unleashed a skill so devastating that the creature disintegrated with a single, elegant slash. The remaining Orthros yelped in terror and scattered into the trees. Mukata's jaw nearly hit the ground as he asked about the attack. Fel, of course, went into smug mode, bragging that it was a skill he invented 600 years ago, wearing the smugness like a crown. Suie, ever the ambitious little slime, wondered if he could learn it too. Mukata, with a hint of teasing, told him it was unlikely since he lacked claws, but praised his acid bullet skill instead. Fel, predictably green with jealousy, muttered something about unfairness. As they set up camp, Mukata remained on edge, double-checking his barrier as if it were a lifeline to sanity. Fel, naturally, was more interested in what they'd eat for dinner, while Suie called out for food like a tiny, demanding overlord. Mukata rushed to him, promising a proper meal, and Fel couldn't help but notice how carefully Mukata treated the two of them. A stark contrast to his usual careless self. While cooking, Mukata asked Fel how long they would be stuck in the forest. Fel casually revealed they were only halfway through, leaving Mukata to process the horrifying fact that they still had 3 weeks of travel ahead. Panicked about running out of meat, he decided to cook some black serpent, remembering rumors that it tasted like chicken. He meticulously removed the meat from the bones, sliced it lean like chicken breast, marinated it with sugar and sake, whipped up a special chili sauce, and fried it all together. Mukata hesitated before tasting it, convincing himself it was just chicken, but the flavor knocked his socks off. Fel immediately snatched the plate, devouring it and demanding more, leaving Mukata shaking his head at the little monster's gluttony. As they trekked deeper, Fel suddenly halted, drawn to a patch of glowing mushrooms. He explained they had powerful healing properties and were extremely rare. Mukata quickly began harvesting them while Suie, predictably, chowed down. Suddenly, the slime began glowing, causing Mukata to panic slightly, but the glow subsided. Using his appraisal skill, Mukata discovered that Suie had gained the ability to create healing potions. Fel explained that this was likely from consuming the mushrooms. Recalling a similar incident where he once saw a slime turn metallic after eating metal, Mukata was ecstatic, showering Suie with praise, and encouraged him to try his new skill. Suie successfully created a healing potion from his own body, and Mukata bottled it up, appraising it as high quality. To their delight, Suie could make 3 levels of potions, each capable of healing different amounts. Fel, ever unimpressed by ordinary things, admitted he had never seen a slime capable of producing potions before and concluded that Suie must be unique. The tiny slime, clearly basking in the praise, jumped onto Fel, who tried to act annoyed but secretly appreciated the attention. Their journey continued until they entered Griffin territory. Mukata froze at the sight of a massive griffin landing nearby, terror practically written across his face. Surprisingly, the griffin showed respect, speaking clearly and addressing Fel directly. It requested a favor, explaining that it wished to fight Fel in order to prove itself worthy of leading its group. Mukata, of course, nearly fainted at the notion of Fel casually battling such a majestic predator while he and Suie were mere bystanders. Fel, completely nonchalant as usual, merely nodded, clearly ready for whatever absurdly dangerous challenge had just presented itself. Mukata, still clinging to whatever scraps of courage he had left, wondered if surviving this forest trek would require not only skill, but a miracle or a serious luck stat boost. Fel agreed to the griffin's challenge, but made it clear he wouldn't go easy. Mukata, panicking internally, immediately ducked behind a tree and sent a mental plea to Fel not to accidentally murder him in the process. The fight began with Fel charging like a man possessed, landing a kick so fierce that feathers rained down a blinding storm of dust. The griffin responded with a powerful strike, but Fel casually summoned his wind magic, conjuring a tornado that shredded the poor bird from the inside out. Mukata, shaking and half cursing himself for trusting Fel, yelled that he'd done enough. Fel finally ended the whirlwind, leaving the griffin battered and bruised. Mukata, rushing over like a worried parent, called Suie to help, drenching the griffin in a healing potion until it was patched up. Though the griffin looked humiliated, Mukata pointed out that the beast had actually managed to scratch Fel, and even Fel had to grudgingly admit it. The victorious griffin let out a triumphant cry, summoning the rest of its flock. They accepted him as their leader, and as thanks, he plucked one of his feathers and gave it to Mukata, swearing that his descendants would remain safe. With the griffins gone, the group settled in for another night, and Fel demanded an absurd amount of meat after expending so much energy. Mukata reminded him that he had meat every day, but relented, deciding to cook the remaining supplies. He fried up orc meat, remembering the fearsome creatures they came from, but quickly convinced himself it was just pork. Fel and Suie attacked the meal like ravenous monsters, Mukata eyeing them with a mix of pride and disgust at their speed. Afterward, Fel asked if Mukata had been keeping up with his offerings to Nenri. Mukata realized he had forgotten, prompting Fel to scold him like a strict spiritual advisor. Nenri appeared, glaring down at him, demanding to know why he had been late. Mukata muttered excuses about being busy, but Nenri, with divine omniscience, pointed out that he had simply forgotten. She lectured him mercilessly until Mukata begged for forgiveness, offering a mountain of Western desserts. Nenri's mood shifted instantly from wrath to drooling ecstasy as she devoured cakes and pastries, instructing Mukata to send her the same bounty next time. Finally, the group exited the forest and approached the kingdom of Leonhardt. Mukata noted they needed to reach the guild, as they were running dangerously low on meat, which sent Fel into immediate panic mode. Searching for the road ahead, they spotted a caravan under attack by bandits. Mukata urged Fel to intervene, promising a special dinner if he saved them. Fel didn't need to hear twice. He dashed off like a whirlwind. At the caravan, the poor travelers were struggling against the bandits, but Fel's roar froze everyone in their tracks. He demanded they surrender, and the bandits, terrified, dropped their weapons. All were captured without further fuss. Mukata met Lambert, the caravan owner, and Lars, the adventurer leader. They gushed over Fel, expressing disbelief at meeting the legendary figure from all the rumors. Mukata asked where they were headed and was told Carolina. Being new to the area, he asked if he could join the group. Lambert, feeling safer with him around, welcomed their company. As Mukata traveled with them, he overheard guards debating whether Fel was a Fenrir or a great wolf. Shocked at the reach of the rumors, he learned that the guilds had been spreading news about Fel using magical teleportation letters, making the legend practically unavoidable. While everyone around him was gawking at Fel like he was some living legend, Mukata quietly fretted over keeping his identity under wraps. With his item storage and shop skills, he knew he could easily be exposed as a summon hero, and the last thing he needed was nobles sniffing around and trying to pull some sneaky stunt in this new kingdom. The caravan eventually stopped for the night, and Fel, ever the greedy brat, reminded Mukata of the special dinner he had promised for saving everyone. The guards settled for some jerky, muttering about how tired they were, while Mukata sneaked off to find a private spot to cook. Fel immediately demanded an absurd amount of meat, and Mukata, who was starting to get annoyed at his endless hunger, sighed. But when Suie piped up, pleading for a bit of meat, Mukata's irritation melted. He happily agreed. Out of stakes, Mukata decided to combine whatever meat he had left into one grand creation. He went all out with marinades, sauces, and flour, shaking it all into a perfect coating before frying it to golden perfection. The result was an exquisite fried chicken dish with two distinct flavors. Suie's eyes sparkled as he devoured it, and even Fel seemed genuinely impressed for once. The smell of Mukata's cooking wafted over to the rest of the caravan, drawing every curious guard and traveler toward the source. Mukata offered some generously, and the men immediately proclaimed it the best food they had ever tasted. By the time Mukata finished cooking and serving, he was utterly exhausted, barely able to stand, and he hadn't eaten a single bite himself. The guards, full and grateful, insisted he rest while they kept watch, and Mukata warned the bandits lurking nearby that any funny business would get them torn apart by Fel, leaving the would-be troublemakers shaking in fear. After a calm night, the caravan finally reached Carolina, the 5th largest city in the kingdom. Lambert explained that his family had been leather merchants there for generations. The captured bandits were handed over to the city knights, and Lars headed to the guild to submit his report. Mukata decided to visit the guild as well and promised Lambert he'd stop by his shop later. At the guild, Mukata discovered that his adventurer card had been unregistered. Apparently, failing to complete the minimum number of quests in the last month had caused them to deactivate it. Mukata reflected on the chaos of the past month. He'd fought, cooked, and survived more than most adventurers did in a lifetime, but the clerk nonchalantly explained that most people push through as many missions as possible to hit F rank quickly, taking advantage of the 3-month time limit. Mukata immediately decided to re-register and proudly introduced his second familiar, Suie. The girl clerk, unimpressed, let out a laugh along with some other adventurers. Mukata tried to ignore their mocking, reminding himself that Suie was ridiculously cute and unique. He then made his way to the guild butcher, but bumped into Lars and his adventurer crew. Mukata casually mentioned he was trying to sell some of the monsters they had caught, and Lars, curious about Fel's hunting skills, asked to see. Mukata obliged, revealing his haul, which left the group completely stunned. They had never even imagined some of these beasts existed. The guild butcher practically squealed with delight, claiming he had never worked with such high-class materials, and that commoners would never get a taste of this meat. He eagerly started skinning a red serpent while Mukata and Fel imagined how it would taste. Lars, still processing the sheer audacity of their previous meals, asked what kind of meat they had eaten the night before. Mukata, with a shrug, casually mentioned that dinner had been a little bit of everything. Rockbird, giant deer, and orc meat, leaving Lars wide-eyed and the others muttering in disbelief at their gluttonous and slightly terrifying appetites. The group immediately apologized to Mukata, clearly not realizing that they had just been served a feast of such ridiculous quality that even the most seasoned gourmets would weep. Mukata, ever magnanimous, or maybe just too lazy to care, shrugged and told them it was fine, since he had mountains of food to spare. Lars, impressed and slightly in awe, mentioned that Mukata was well known in the city and encouraged him to call if he ever needed anything, leaving Mukata with a small smirk at being recognized without doing much. That night, Mukata rested in a quiet inn, pondering whether he should focus on reaching F rank to keep access to the guild butcher. The thought of becoming a full-fledged adventurer made him roll his eyes. He was already doing more than enough with cooking, managing his shop, and keeping Fel alive. Suddenly, Nenri's voice cut through his thoughts, reminding him that he had more important duties to attend to. Mukata, curious, checked his shop for sweets, selecting jellies and pudding to offer. He thanked Nenri for her blessings, and as she tried the wobbling pudding, she was delighted by its texture and sweetness. The pleasure must have caught the attention of other goddesses, because a subtle ripple of divine envy seemed to brush across the heavens, leaving Mukata secretly thrilled by the chaos his desserts were causing. The next day, Mukata examined the guild job board. Each task offered points depending on its difficulty. Herb gathering gave 1 point, goblin hunting 3. To reach F rank, he needed a total of 100 points. Fel immediately suggested taking the Goblin quest to level up faster, but Mukata refused, still traumatized from his last encounter with those foul creatures. Fel, clearly motivated by the thought of seafood waiting at the ocean, tried to argue, appealing to Suie, who was instantly excited at the idea of fighting. Mukata reluctantly reminded himself that Suie now had the ability to make his own medicine, so fighting wouldn't be reckless. With a sigh and an internal groan, Mukata agreed to the goblin hunt. They entered the forest with the goal of hunting 3 goblins. The first goblins they encountered were easily dispatched by Suie's acid bullets, leaving Mukata to gruesomely collect the right ears as proof. Mukata struggled with this, muttering that cooking monsters didn't mean he had signed up to be a part-time executioner, while Fel found his squeamishness amusing. Mukata's grumbling, of course, attracted a swarm of goblins, all of which Suie obliterated effortlessly with acid spray. When they discovered a full goblin camp, Mukata suggested they had already done enough, but Suie begged to continue. Mukata, unable to resist Fel's dragging force and Suie's pleading puppy eyes, gave in. By the end, the entire goblin settlement lay in ruins, leaving Mukata emotionally scarred from collecting ears and worrying about the disposal of bodies. Fel suggested burning them, but Mukata immediately panicked about starting a forest fire. Ingeniously or horrifyingly, Mukata ordered Suie to melt the corpses with acid. Suie trembled, then grew to an enormous size, revealing a new skill to manipulate his form. As he shook again, he split into countless smaller slimes, creating an army that efficiently dissolved the goblin remains. Mukata, both horrified and impressed, wondered just how strong Suie could become. Even Fel, who had seen plenty of chaos, was momentarily stunned. When Mukata returned to the guild, every adventurer and clerk gawked at the sheer number of goblins they had taken out. He was called to meet Guildmaster Willem, who confirmed that the entire goblin settlement had indeed been wiped out. Mukata admitted to the feat, praising Fel's overwhelming strength. Willem revealed the true reason for summoning him, a message from the royal palace. The kingdom declared that Mukata and his companions could live freely within the country, yet they wished to rely on him in emergencies. Mukata celebrated his newfound independence, thrilled to be free from the nobles' endless schemes, while Willem casually added that merely having a legendary beast like Fel in the country would serve as a sufficient deterrent to neighboring nations. Mukata couldn't help but smirk at the absurdity. A lazy shopkeeper with a meat-obsessed demon wolf and an army of talking slimes was suddenly the kingdom's secret weapon. Hearing that Mukata was aiming to level up his guild rank, Guildmaster Willem decided to flex his authority and raised him directly to C rank, leaving Mukata slack-jawed in disbelief. Willem explained that it would be a problem if Fel's master was too low-ranked, which Mukata silently agreed with, although he still considered Willem slightly insane for caring about rank. In exchange for the rank up, Willem mentioned he had some requests, but Mukata tried to decline, not wanting to get stuck doing mundane guild work. Willem, however, revealed he actually wanted Fel's help to tackle A and S-ranked missions, and Mukata's jaw practically hit the floor. Fel, of course, was unbothered, confident that he could handle anything, which made Willem beam with relief, since no ordinary adventurer could even dream of attempting those missions. Willem assured Mukata that the other adventurers would be warned not to interfere, and Mukata seized the moment to make a special request. He revealed the high-ranked monsters he had been secretly keeping. Willem and the guild butcher were stunned. The butcher had never even seen a chimera before. Mukata explained that he had kept them hidden to avoid causing a scene, but intended to sell them to the guild. Willem reluctantly admitted they didn't have the funds to buy a chimera, while the butcher practically drooled at the chance to work with a blue ogre, pointing out its unique S-rank traits. He then pointed out the Orc King, capable of controlling all other orcs, leaving Mukata dumbfounded at just how many S-ranked monsters Fel had hunted. Suie, true to his ambitious slime nature, popped out and declared that he wanted to be strong like Fel, which sent Mukata into a mild panic. Willem told him to return the next day when his new guild card would be ready. Later that night, Mukata fretted over dinner plans. Fel demanded meat as usual, and Mukata, noting that they'd been deep frying everything lately, decided to cook something lighter. He boiled rockbird meat, prepared fresh vegetables, shredded the meat, and even had Suie help top the dish with a sesame dressing. Fel eyed the vegetables suspiciously but ended up devouring the meal, while Suie declared the sesame sauce heavenly. Realizing he hadn't made rice, Mukata whipped up a sandwich for himself, which Suie eagerly sampled, and Fel quickly asked for seconds. After the meal, Fel rested, sprawled in Mukata's cramped in-space. Mukata, feeling it inadequate for his wild combat-trained companions, unrolled his futon to create a more comfortable sleeping arrangement before instantly falling asleep himself. The next day, Mukata returned to the guild and was stunned to find his new guild card gleaming silver, complete with a 6-month time limit for completing missions. No more risk of deactivation. Willem paid him for all the monsters he had sold. The red serpent was worth 200 gold, the blue ogre 432 gold, and After factoring in the Goblin subjugation, the total value soared past 1,900 gold.
Average.
Mukata was speechless, simultaneously thrilled and worried about attracting attention. Willem then outlined the 2 missions he wanted their help with. The first involved a group of metal lizards whose armored skin made physical attacks nearly useless. The second was hunting a herd of bloody horned bulls wreaking havoc in a beginner hunting ground. Fel naturally immediately thought of the bulls as beef and got visibly excited at the thought of steak. As they prepared to leave the guild, Mukata suggested departing in the morning to avoid traveling at night. Fel, however, had other priorities. He was too impatient to wait and wanted steak as soon as possible, leaving Mukata to silently question whether he was traveling with a genius or a monster obsessed with meat. Mukata stopped by Lambert's store, intrigued by the idea of picking up a new bag. Lambert laid out a small arsenal of bags, each crafted from different materials, and Mukata realized this wasn't just any bag. It was going to carry Suie. Deciding to delegate the life or death choice to the slime himself, Mukata let Suie pick. Naturally, Suie went for the bag made of red boar leather, immediately claiming it as his own. Mukata, meanwhile, sifted through belts and new shoes, briefly debating whether to buy some from his own shop. He ultimately decided against it. Standing out in a town where rumors about him already ran wild seemed like a terrible idea. The total came to 11 gold, but Lambert waved it off, insisting Mukata take it for free, citing his heroic deeds and the top-tier meal he had served. Mukata accepted politely, though Lambert's lingering thoughts drifted to the black serpent they had eaten. He asked if Mukata still had its skin, but Mukata admitted he had sold it to the guild. Lambert groaned at the loss, lamenting the persistent shortage of serpent skin, and daydreamed aloud about getting his hands on red serpent hide. Mukata, feeling guilty, promised to sell any future serpent skin directly to Lambert. As they left, Mukata couldn't stop thinking about the taste of serpent, and he decided it deserved a repeat performance. He marinated the meat, fired up the pan, and prepared to give Fel an all-you-can-eat experience. Of course, Mukata couldn't resist sneaking a few bites himself, prompting Fel and Suie to grumble like spoiled children. Fel demanded to start eating immediately, but Mukata fried the meat a second time for extra crispiness. Once they dug in, even Fel had to admit that double-fried serpent was an absolute game-changer. After the meal, their stomachs protested violently, and Mukata, ignoring their groans, continued cooking for himself, planning to stash portions in storage for a rainy day. He cracked open a beer and reflected on how fortunate he was to have companions like these who made the chaos of adventure almost bearable. The next day, Mukata and Fel journeyed to the mountains where the guildmaster had reported the metallic lizards. Mukata wandered around, speculating where the lizards might be hiding, but Fel's heightened senses immediately detected a cave tucked into the mountainside. Mukata hesitated, suggesting they wait outside, but Fel, impatient as ever, barreled straight in. Inside, they found only one lizard, glowing with an eerie metallic sheen. Mukata realized it was a Mithril lizard, and Fel theorized it had evolved after feasting on tons of Mithril. Mukata muttered concerns about magic attacks being ineffective, but Fel casually countered with lightning magic that bypassed the lizard's natural diffusion. The lizard was obliterated instantly, leaving Mukata to bow respectfully and begin storing the loot. He even found a piece of Mithril ore and started fantasizing about crafting armor or weapons from it, with Suie eagerly helping him collect the ore. He considered the possibilities. Armor that could diffuse magic, or using the lizard's skin for gear. Fel, of course, wasn't impressed by any of Mukata's careful planning. With a flick of his hand, he crushed the Mithril ore, announcing he didn't need armor since his barrier was way superior. Fel's restless energy meant he wanted action, and he suggested they move on to the guildmaster's second mission. Mukata, still meticulously calculating and slightly horrified at Fel's recklessness, tried to protest. But Fel, driven by the eternal promise of stakes and adventure, simply dragged Mukata off, leaving him no choice but to follow. Mukata and his companions finally arrived at the sprawling field where the infamous bloody horned bulls roamed. Mukata's face paled as he sized up the beasts, noting that they were as massive as rhinos and had the kind of temper that could crush a grown man with one toss. Deciding that his life was far too valuable to risk, he hung back cautiously, peering from a safe distance while Fel sauntered forward, radiating that irritating confidence that made Mukata want to strangle him on the spot. Suie, never one to sit still when someone else was showing off, immediately grew jealous. The slime morphed and darted after Fel, leaving Mukata muttering curses under his breath about how he had volunteered for nothing except babysitting these two disasters. Within moments, an enormous blast of wind erupted across the field, and all the bulls were sent tumbling like bowling pins. Mukata blinked, completely taken aback, while Suie bounced excitedly, detailing every glorious moment of the fight. Fel casually praised Mukata for handling the aftermath, which involved stuffing the defeated bulls into his seemingly endless storage. Suie, ever the overachiever, split into dozens of smaller slimes to help carry the massive load. Mukata, despite himself, began dreaming of all the beef dishes he could craft once they returned. Meanwhile, back in town, Willem and the guild's butcher nearly fell out of their chairs upon seeing the Mithril lizard Mukata had brought back. Mukata's nerves flared, wondering if he had inadvertently caused a diplomatic incident. The butcher, eyes practically bulging, explained that an intact Mithril lizard hadn't been seen in 400 years, making this an astronomical rarity. Willem added that the discovery hinted at a new Mithril mine, emphasizing that only 3 such mines existed in the entire world. Mukata's jaw nearly hit the floor. Willem further explained that the lizard would be kept as an offering to the king, but that Mukata would be compensated handsomely, around 5,000 gold for the discovery. The butcher's envy was palpable, while Mukata felt a cold sweat forming on his back, silently questioning why his life had to involve this much attention. Willem then asked about the bulls, only to be stunned again when Mukata revealed the task was already completed. Mukata, quietly panicking, imagined all the nobles suddenly flooding his peaceful life, while Fel, blissfully unconcerned, focused solely on one thing: steaks. Back at their temporary camp, Mukata prepared their dinner with military precision, cutting juicy steaks and frying them to a perfect medium rare. He let the meat rest in foil while Fel drooled impatiently with Suie hovering nearby. When the first bite hit their tongues, the trio was speechless. The steak was nothing short of divine, juices bursting with every bite. Fel, clearly the most shameless foodie alive, compared it to high-end Wagyu and demanded seconds immediately. Mukata complied, adding his special steak sauce to elevate the flavor, leaving Fel in a state of ecstatic meat-induced delirium. After the feast, the trio collapsed in a food coma, Fel lamenting that raw meat would never feel satisfying again. Amid the post-meal bliss, Mukata remembered, far too late, that he had forgotten his offerings to Nenri. He scrambled to prepare them, hearing her voice list off every indulgent treat she expected. As he complied, Mukata suddenly noticed the voices of other goddesses chiming in. They grumbled about Nenri hoarding all the sweets, though Nenri defended herself by citing her blessing. The other goddesses, eager for their share, offered their own blessings, claiming that a more compatible blessing could yield far greater benefits. Mukata, sighing in exhaustion, realized that he was now tangled in a divine squabble over sweets and magical favor, all while trying to keep his companions alive and his stomach happy. Mukata quickly realized that his current blessings didn't exactly suit his natural affinities. Since he had a clear knack for fire and earth, it made more sense for him to receive blessings from the earth goddess Kisha or the fire goddess Agni. Of course, the situation immediately devolved into chaos because the ever-dramatic Nenri decided to intervene, scolding the others for angering the god of creation with their reckless generosity. Still, the fire and earth goddesses insisted it would be fine if they only granted minor blessings, which Mukata knew was code for "we're still going to mess with your life." Mukata cautiously tried to argue that no one had ever held multiple blessings at once, hoping to wriggle out of this divine mess, but it didn't matter. The goddesses ignored him and lavished him with blessings anyway. Meanwhile, Ruka, the water goddess, immediately began sobbing over her uselessness. Mukata didn't have any water affinity, so her blessing would do nothing, and she was clearly offended that she would be left out. The other goddesses panicked, shrieking for him to fix it, and Mukata, now feeling like he was negotiating a corporate merger with literal gods, looked to Suie for comfort. Spotting his loyal slime, he got an idea. He asked Ruka to redirect her blessing to Suie. Surprisingly, Ruka agreed, giving Suie a full blessing. Kisha smugly pointed out the absurdity, noting that Ruka only offered blessings once every 100 years, whereas the others practically handed them out like candy, explaining why the god of creation was constantly annoyed. Now officially blessed, Mukata had no choice but to send the goddesses offerings. True to form, he overcompensated with an enormous box of desserts. Mukata checked his status and marveled at the stats, while Suie, ever clueless, asked what blessings actually did. Mukata explained that they offered protection and enhanced power, though Suie's brain seemed to short-circuit at the concept. Determined to test the blessings, Mukata tried his magic the next day. To his delight, he discovered his power had skyrocketed, and his stamina remained intact even after prolonged spells. Feeling smug, he had Suie test the water blessing, prompting the slime to form a spinning orb of water and shoot it at a tree, which snapped in half instantly. Suie then created water blades, effortlessly slicing through multiple trees, leaving Mukata simultaneously awed and slightly terrified. He reminded Suie to keep it under control, especially in town, but of course, Fel immediately perked up, eager for a fight. Mukata groaned, telling him it was too soon, leaving Fel grumbling in disappointment at the lack of a worthy opponent. Later, Mukata continued experimenting with his earth magic, perfecting his stonewall spell and even building a small house. He He was eager to impress his companions, though Fel barely looked up from his latest hunting venture. Predictably, Fel returned with a black serpent in tow, knowing full well Mukata had a deal with Lambert. Mukata eyed Fel suspiciously, suspecting ulterior motives, but Fel's only goal was a special dinner as reward for his efforts. Fel gave a quick nod to Mukata's hut, admitting it was surprisingly comfortable, and suggested they might go hunting that day. Mukata, however, was far too practical and refused, insisting they first return to town to deliver the freshly caught black serpent to Lambert. Back at the guild, Mukata visited the butcher to hand over all the bull meat. The butcher, still visibly awestruck from previous encounters, quickly paid Mukata for the portion he sold. Mukata then produced the black serpent, prompting the butcher to gape in astonishment that he had found another one so effortlessly. Mukata requested the butcher's help in preparing it, while Suie, bouncing excitedly, asked if it was already time for lunch. Mukata sighed, realizing that even with divine blessings and legendary beasts, his life would always be a chaotic mix of cooking, adventuring, and babysitting two utterly ridiculous companions. Mukata prepared to cook, and Fel, ever the impatient carnivore, asked why he seemed so excited. Mukata revealed his latest purchase, a meat grinder which he planned to use to make perfectly minced meat. His eyes sparkled with the sort of unhealthy glee only a true cooking obsessive could muster. Suie, naturally, was instantly fascinated and insisted on helping, hopping around eagerly as Mukata fed bull meat into the grinder. Soon, they were tossing in pork as well, mixing everything together with eggs and onions before shaping the meat into uniform patties, perfect not just for eating but for storing safely in Mukata's magical inventory. He fried the patties to golden perfection, added his secret sauce, and Fel immediately dove in, barely restraining himself from devouring the entire batch in one sitting. After the meal, Mukata attempted to wash his shirt but was immediately disappointed by the poor quality soap. Inspiration struck. Why not turn this into a business opportunity? He bought a stock of shampoo and conditioner, discreetly bottling them so it wouldn't look suspicious, while Suie splashed happily in a tub nearby. Mukata realized he hadn't bathed properly in ages and decided to check in with Lambert. Lambert was initially surprised to see the black serpent skin but quickly listened as Mukata pitched himself as a merchant, hoping to gauge the value of his products. Lambert sniffed the soap, noted its pleasant fragrance, and Mukata nervously explained the shampoo's cleaning power and the conditioner's silky effect. To Mukata's shock, Lambert suddenly broke into tears, overwhelmed with gratitude. With his wedding anniversary approaching, Lambert admitted he had no clue what to get his wife Marie, who was tired of jewelry and accessories, and Mukata's products were perfect. Curious about the setup, Mukata asked if Lambert even had a bathtub. Lambert proudly showed him the custom-built tub, complete with a magical purifier and earth magician enhancements, worth hundreds of gold. Mukata's mind immediately raced with visions of finally bathing properly, and Lambert offered to introduce him to the seller, an offer Mukata gratefully accepted. Mukata left Lambert with a sample to test first, and Lambert promised to try it himself rather than experiment on Marie. The next day, Mukata returned to Lambert's store and was greeted with enthusiasm. Marie appeared, immediately curious about the products. Lambert, after using the shampoo and conditioner himself, smelled incredible, his hair silky and soft. Though he grumbled at ruining the anniversary surprise, Marie, however, confirmed that the products worked wonders on her own hair, making it beautiful and manageable, and insisted that Mukata sell them wholesale at their shop. Mukata was flabbergasted. He didn't even own a store, but Marie assured him the products would fly off the shelves and gave him no choice. Excited by the prospect of a personal supply, Marie practically danced in glee, while Mukata left exhausted after delivering a large batch to their store. Fel, predictably, immediately began pestering Mukata to search for a dungeon, but Mukata refused, citing a summons from the guildmaster. As Fel sulked outside, Mukata overheard adventurers gossiping about a rogue wyvern nearby and began to worry about the threat. Arriving at the guild, Mukata was stunned to see a colossal pile of gold awaiting him. Willem explained that Mukata would receive 5,800 gold for discovering the Mithril mine alone, leaving Mukata daydreaming about finally affording a bathtub of his own. Just as he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction, an emergency alarm rang. A herd of wyverns was approaching, instantly snapping Mukata out of his fantasies and leaving him to wonder how he had gotten himself into yet another chaotic adventure. Scattered among the chaos were injured adventurers, some writhing from the wyvern's deadly poison. The guild was in a panic, running low on potions and antidotes, but Mukata calmly pulled out his high-grade healing potions. When Willem applied one, the man's injuries and poison were instantly neutralized, leaving everyone slack-jawed at how completely the potion restored him. It was as if Mukata had brought some sort of miracle in a bottle. Willem immediately ordered all S-rank adventurers and above to engage the wyverns. Mukata realized that meant him, and he started mentally preparing for a fight, but Fel had other plans. He boldly declared that they would handle the wyverns themselves, because apparently risking everyone else's lives was less fun than hoarding all the wyvern meat for themselves. Mukata hesitated, but Fel was bored and hungry, practically drooling at the thought of wyvern steaks. Willem offered to assist, but Fel waved him off, insisting the man would just slow them down. In the field, the wyverns loomed in the distance, wings casting shadows like dark storm clouds. Mukata took one look and mentally prepared for the worst, while Fel, ever reckless, saw it as the perfect opportunity to train Suie against flying enemies. The two charged forward with a mix of agility and chaos, dodging gusts of wind and razor-sharp claws. Fel instructed Suie to aim for the heads, though hitting wings was easier and often just as effective. Suie's first shot missed the target but managed to topple a wyvern anyway, giving Fel the chance to finish it off in a spectacular, flashy strike. Mukata watched from the sidelines, half amused, half panicked, and half wondering if Suie was slowly turning into a mini-Fel. Suddenly, one wyvern broke formation and lunged straight for Mukata. He froze, but Fel's magical barrier protected him, creating a shimmering wall of safety. Suie, growing bolder, bounced the creature away with a well-timed acid blast while Fel delivered the finishing blow. Mukata could hardly believe what he was seeing, a mix of awe and terror swirling in his chest. Within moments, all the wyverns were either defeated or fleeing, leaving the field eerily quiet. Fel, ever the hungry beast, immediately reminded Mukata that a successful hunt meant only one thing: food. Mukata, already a step ahead, pulled out the meat patties he had prepared earlier. Fel's excitement faltered for a moment, thinking it was the same meal as before. Mukata, however, had an idea. He coated the patties with egg and breadcrumbs before frying them again, creating a crispy, golden crust. When Fel took his first bite, his eyes practically bugged out. The crunch transformed the dish entirely, and he devoured them like a man possessed. Mukata couldn't help but smirk at Fel's over-the-top reaction, knowing that such a simple tweak made the difference between ordinary and legendary. Meanwhile, back at the guild, Willem and the adventurers were growing anxious. Rumors of the wyverns spread fast, and many worried whether Mukata could handle the threat alone. Their concerns only grew as minutes stretched into hours. Finally, Mukata returned, brushing off the worry as if it were nothing, and reported that they had wiped out the entire herd. The guild erupted in celebration, and Mukata found their reactions somewhat ridiculous, considering the battle had been easy, thanks largely to Fel and Suie doing all the work, and stopping for lunch in the middle of it. Willem explained the reason for their awe. Had the adventurers themselves fought, at least half would have perished. Mukata, embarrassed, avoided mentioning that they had paused for a meal, but Fel gleefully pointed it out, leaving Mukata red-faced. Mukata reported that they had defeated 13 wyverns in total, and Willem immediately expressed interest in purchasing their parts. Mukata, trying to be generous, offered everything except the meat, knowing Fel would riot otherwise. Unfortunately, the guild only had enough gold to buy half of the wyvern's components, leaving Mukata slightly frustrated, and secretly hoping they wouldn't ask for a discount. Back at the inn, Mukata suddenly remembered he needed to send offerings to the goddesses. No sooner had he thought it than a divine message from Agni arrived, scolding him to hurry up. Mukata explained that he was about to send the offerings, but just then he received a secretive note from Nenri, reminding him that she had been the first to bless him, and therefore expected more sweets than the others. Keisha, never one to miss an opportunity, slyly requested that Mukata send her the shampoo and hair products he had been selling, while Ruka wanted to sample some of his other culinary creations. Mukata sighed, pointing out that he couldn't keep all the offerings separate since he planned to send them at once. Agni naturally got furious at the other goddesses for making secretive requests and jumped in herself, demanding alcohol. Mukata, cornered and muttering under his breath, had no choice but to agree. The next day, Mukata and Fel found themselves drawing even more attention after their spectacular wyvern hunt. Mukata made his way to a specialty shop, eyes wide as he surveyed the rows of bathtubs, some crafted from rare materials offering magical effects. The clerk explained that prices started at 300 gold, and the more exotic tubs carried far higher costs. Mukata considered the options carefully, but when the clerk unveiled the newest model, Mukata blinked. It looked like a completely normal bathtub. Without hesitation, he chose the green bathtub, shocking the clerk, who had expected hesitation given the price. Mukata casually revealed he could pay up front, and when asked where it should be delivered, he simply said to put it into his storage, leaving the clerk speechless. Overjoyed, Mukata told Fel they should leave the city, noting that everyone's eyes had been glued to them ever since the wyvern battle. Once in a secluded spot, Fel immediately wandered off hunting while Mukata marked out an area for himself. Using his stonewall skill, he erected a private space and took out the bathtub. He instructed Suie to fill it with water and then heated it with a fireball, finally taking a long, luxurious bath after scrubbing himself furiously. For the first time in ages, Mukata relaxed completely, Suie keeping watch as usual. Afterwards, Mukata turned his attention to cooking some of the wyvern meat. Inspired by Fel's earlier praise, he thinly sliced the meat, creating a rich sauce, and prepared a special wyvern beef bowl. With time on his hands, he decided to make a stew as well. He bought ingredients, chopped vegetables meticulously, seared the meat until brown, added the vegetables, poured in water and red wine, and seasoned it with a savory sauce before letting it simmer. Suie commented that Fel had returned, but Mukata's focus remained on the stew until a colossal dinosaur suddenly emerged from the trees. Mukata froze, shocked at the sheer size of the creature. Fel nonchalantly explained that finding the wyverns underwhelming, he had gone hunting again and encountered an earth dragon. Mukata's jaw dropped. He couldn't believe a dragon was standing before him, and he had no clue how to handle it. Fel, ever the foodie and thrill seeker, declared that it would be delicious. Mukata tried to reason that the dragon, like the other exceptionally rare monsters he had hunted, would be impossible to sell, and this was going to be a huge problem. Fel, completely ignoring practicalities, suggested asking the guild to help resell it, and Mukata considered that it might actually be possible, even as his mind raced with the sheer logistics and danger of the situation. After preparing the wyvern stew, Mukata noticed Fel's eyes lighting up with excitement at the sight of the food, but Mukata quickly stopped him, pointing out that Fel was filthy from his earlier fight. Fel looked slightly offended, having been told off by his own human companion. Mukata insisted he needed to bathe before dinner, leaving Fel shocked and muttering something about being a legendary Fenrir, not a common pup. Mukata rummaged through his shop and found some dog grooming tools, prompting Fel to grumble that he wasn't a dog. Undeterred, Mukata helped untangle Fel's fur with a brush, then began splashing him with water. Fel flinched at the first splash, and Mukata wondered why, but Fel immediately denied it, trying to act tough. Mukata continued to soak him, and Fel, finding it ticklish, suggested Suie could just use his water magic. Mukata reminded him that Suie's water wouldn't be hot. Thinking quickly, Mukata transformed Suie into a hot water shower, drenching Fel completely. He shampooed Fel thoroughly, who gradually began to enjoy the pampering, though he tensed up when Mukata mentioned washing his face. Reluctantly, Fel agreed, unwilling to appear weak even as a legendary Fenrir. After finishing, Mukata tried to dry him off, but Fel mischievously shook off all the water. Using fire magic and Fel's wind, they created a warm breeze to help him dry, and Mukata couldn't resist commenting on how handsome Fel looked. Fel, ignoring the praise, demanded it was time to eat. Dinner began with the special beef bowls, and Fel declared them outstanding, while Mukata was surprised that the wyvern meat tasted remarkably similar to Wagyu. As they ate, Mukata lectured Fel about taking regular baths, which Fel grumbled about but grudgingly agreed after Mukata used Suie to compliment him on his improved appearance. Meanwhile, back at the guild, Willem revealed that reselling a dragon was nearly impossible, and the butcher agreed, explaining that every part of the dragon was far too valuable to work with. Fel complained that all he wanted was the meat, but Mukata reminded him it wasn't that simple. Willem suggested that a certain dragon expert might make it possible, and both Mukata and Fel became excited at the prospect. Willem pointed them toward another city near the sea, which immediately thrilled Fel, who imagined indulging in krakens and other sea monsters. The guild members laughed at Fel's ridiculous ideas, but deep down they knew that was exactly what he would try to do. Before leaving, Mukata bid farewell to the people he had met along the way, reflecting on the strange, dangerous, and surprisingly delicious adventures they had shared. Fel, ever impatient, was already eager for the next hunt, dragging Mukata along. And that, for now, marked the end of this chapter of their journey. The video concluded with a reminder to the viewers to like and subscribe, leaving the audience eager for the next installment of Mukata and Fel's wild. But don't worry, when the second season will come, I will upload it right away. So, subscribe to our channel to not miss the next journey.